Sometimes what I do when I communicate on this mirror, through this mirror, how the morphogenetic field structure works between lines of communication on a motherboard. Um, the simplicity of some things, particularly when it comes to map reading geographical consciousness terrain, right? The geometrical math that represents lines of communication, folding space and time, if you will, right, between time and no time. Visual projections of what we experience in our mirror, if you will, right? And so sometimes what I do is I throw really simple questions out, even though for me, I sort of already know the answer. So it's just like, then why waste your time? You already know the answer because you're a student, right? So the way that I translate this by asking some questions is what we call ponder, right? Because sometimes you can ask a question and then that question, okay, by the being that is running an operating system, which is a circulation library, right? Because our heart and our lungs, a living, breathing organism of a planet, of what's held in memory banks, right, as water related to blood, right? The water of the planet, right? It's circulating in water cycles, which are atmospherics, right? So I know this because of how I've experienced, for example, my own learning curve of how libraries work, how circulation libraries work, as I've exchanged between getting rid of things. Remember how the wastewater stuff works. We're in a wastewater treatment plant of garbage in, garbage out, codes in, communicating, DNA codes communicating, genetics, genes, genetic swarming, genetic codes are communicating with us, and our antenna is picking that up, right? So now you get into the transcription, which is transcribing, just like we know what a scribe is, right? Which is recording the information, just like a court reporter does in a courtroom, using a keypad with 5 fingers on each hand, right? Now you're into keyboards, which is musical notes, which is math and geometry. Or if you will, hypertext, hyperspeed, hyperspace, right? Hypercubes, right? Ice cubes, fire and ice cubes, right? Eternal spirit of fire, right? Need some cooling, baby, okay? To maintain the balance in those waves, which is the equilibrium state, to maintain what? 0. Perfectly balanced. Maintaining the stars that are in perfectly balanced with God's spirit of fire, eternal spirit of fire, which would be the original creation, right? God's atom, seed, speed, vibration. Experiencing the eternal love vibration. We experience in us, we share with others, right? As a matter of what? Love. The light that is communicating. Matter. The matter. The matter. Formatting. For matter. Minus slash the plus. Memory plus, memory minus. Memory plus, memory minus. Memory plus, memory minus. And how that relates to what? Biogenesis. Right? And sort of how that works when I was a child and realizing my spirit has never left eternity because the eternal spirit of fire is always there. Like in the same place. It's never left home. Whoa, never left that single point. That's it. It starts with a single spiral. Which means it starts with a single wave line of communication. Through what? Sound and light. Right? Joined as one. To become one with all creation. Right? So what's in our mirror is the image of God's love. Right? So now we're into mirrors and magnets. And so now we're into torque speed, right? Between magnets. Ones that are living and one that's dead. Right? So now you understand the exchange rate of electrons between chasing time and not experiencing any time because we're experiencing eternal unconditional love. And how that relates to healing and how that relates to time. the time that it takes to become one in love with all creation. And measuring that and graphing that as scalar logs, falling off a log scale, water, column, distribution tables, right? Units of consciousness that are using operating systems based on codes of communication, lines of communication. And dial the operator. Is this the main operator? This is the main operator. You got the main fire station, the eternal spirit of fire. How can I help you? Right? The first fire engine out, the first fire engine of creation. Right? No baggage. Right? It's not a freight train. Right? Carrying baggage. All that baggage is what? What's held in cellular memory. Now you're into the difference in the speed between inside, outside, right? Pre-matter phase and matter phasing, right? Pause the video, right? Fast forward, brrr, rewind, reel to reels, rewinding binary codes, trinary codes of communication, geometric lines of communication. And so I have fun with this sometimes, but I realize because my feelings are so sensitive, it's like map reading, what the response is going to be, the internal response, what the central living nervous system response is going to be to what it is that I communicate and how they're going to respond neurologically, bioneurologically, how the neuron chemicals, the chemical messengers are going to react to the communication by an eternal spirit of fire, right? And so I don't like to necessarily repeat things, but I have described what it's like to experience lighting yourself on fire because of your soul's willingness to serve forever on behalf of the one. And that means not choosing out of free will. Remember, we have free will, which is in the use of our energy. So when you're choosing of your own free will to use every single one of the electrons that are being generated out of an eternal sun, which is eternal unconditional love, so that there is no separation between what you are and what God is, so that you have an eternal relationship with eternal unconditional love, which is the eternal spirit of fire, so that you have made of your own free will the choice to be a multiversal observer of creation energy, which means we hold zero units of energy captive. Not one, not ever. And that's when it happens. That's how you light yourself on fire. That's a free will choice to do that. That way, it does what? There is no confusion about your true self, my true self, our identities, who our identities are, the function of our energy, which is the function and purpose of our energy, is directed in the service of God forever, so that we are never separated from an eternal God, which represents eternal light, which is gifting electrons forever. That is a choice. That's why the words and the way that they're sort of described when they talk about chosen ones, chosen one, being one with all creation, we're experiencing being in love because we're experiencing eternal unconditional love through us we share with others so they can experience God's love. in them we experience in us that allows them to know the truth. So there's no confusion. So there's no chaos. So there's no imbalance. So there are no lies. That's right. Love is truth, because love goes on forever. Gifting electrons, gifting love that goes on forever. That's the eternal spirit of fire that does that. And so I try and keep it at that simple of a level, right? So that there's no confusion, right? So it simply means there's what I experience and what others experience. If they're not experiencing that, like when I was a child, then that's when the first question comes up. That's the only time that I ever had a question. When I communicate with others about questions, about what we know and what we don't know, and what we know to be the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is the eternal truth, because the eternal truth of an eternal God is eternal love. And how that relates to what we call assimilation. Asimilar geographical user interface, or if you will, sound and light burn patterns that are represented by the unit of soul arcing consciousness that is operating a Merkaba, which is the actual spin rotation of that star as to its state of equilibrium, which means it's running a clear channel of star network crystal consciousness communication. So there is no mistaking the communication that is coming through that template that represents what love is. That is the main line to God's fire engine of creation. That's what I experience in me that I share with all the others, which is all the others that are in the mirror. So that's a high-speed magnet, gifting electrons that go on forever, so that no one is ever experiencing a loss of one of God's children. Now we're back to what I was experiencing as a child, right? About what I do to you, I do to me, and restoring God consciousness, which is restoring the energy that we lost as a result of what? So I was thinking earlier about parents, mothers and fathers, because here would be an example, and I'm going to use sort of a George Carlin way to impart this, because laughter is sort of medicine. But my father and my mother did not inform me as soon as I was aware enough to be able to comprehend the simple alphabet soup fire letters, to be told or instructed or informed by my mother, who tells me at 4 years of age, by the way, Robert, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you beamed yourself in here into a black hole. Are you aware that you're in a black hole? Mom, you did not need to tell me that. I was very aware of that before I jumped in here. Okay. So imagine I was to have a conversation like that with my mother in 1955. Or imagine I was to have that conversation with my father, who was a brilliant mathematical, metallurgic, aeronautical engineer. Since you were wondering, Pop, about, you haven't even been to school yet. How did you learn this stuff? And I was to say to my father, well, you tell me, Pop. You're running a circulation library, right? Of what you're aware of in your library. Are you aware of the fact that we're in a black hole? Did you know that? My dad would be looking in the mirror at me and going, you're only 5 years of age. You don't know. How would you possibly know what a black hole is at that age? Right? Well, Pop, all I got to do is read your manuals. All your engineering manuals, all your mathematical, all the stuff they're teaching by the virtue of the schools that you've gone to, which represents the programming of what's held in memory through the APIN system? Are you not aware of that, Pop? Right. So now speed up the tape, right? The magnetic tape, right? Sound buffer. How much of the movie can you compress into a single electron? How many electrons do you need of sound and light to be able to put into that capacitor? All the movies that are running simultaneously throughout the entire cosmos. So it's like, how much time do you got, Pop? You want all the details? You realize how long that's going to take to be able to unfold that library? So let's just keep it simple. Right? It began out of what love is, right? So you know that love goes on forever because it doesn't work backwards in time. So we're talking about an eternal sun. So that means that's an eternal state of consciousness that is gifting electrons to go on forever, which is what love is, which is what light is. So I figure at 4 years of age, that's simple enough, Pop. Okay, so now we're going to figure out how we ended up in a consciousness trap. How did we end up in a black hole? Oh, so now we lead to a larger conversation with my dad. Do you remember why you're in here? I know why I'm in here. But we're under security team protocols. We're working as teams coming in here. We have a job to do. So you realize that once you become aware of, in this system, it becomes aware of that. So, in other words, when it becomes aware of that, that's a data miner. We don't want it to capture the codes, which is the information, because of the speed differential between one and the other. A dead magnet, a dead light magnet, what it becomes aware of and can thus record, because it's running on memory. We don't operate on memory, Pop. What do you mean you don't operate on memory? God's eternity. God doesn't need memory to remember what it is. Wow, you must have an eternal relationship with an eternal God. Yeah, eternal love, Pop. How many conversations do you know that take place between children that are 4 and 5 years of age and parents that are in the 30s and 40s? Today. Right. Now we're back into the torque speed differential between resistors and capacitors on a motherboard. Right. What we know, when we know it, why we know it, when we know it, where we know it. Oh, you mean you can come from one matrix into another matrix that fast? Yes. So in other words, you're experiencing being in some other place where there isn't a black hole. That's right. So you chose to jump into a black hole. That's right. It's called a salvage mission. Getting mama up. Getting mama up. Getting mama up. Right. A healing center. A triage. Triage, those folks that work in the emergency medical profession, occupations, right, know what a triage is, right? Three age, right? Triage center, mass casualty zones, mass population density consciousness zones, mass casualty centers, right? So when you're mapping that at 4 years of age, you realize that you're on a battlefield that is a triage center. Because you're experiencing what everything else is being experienced by everything that is there between two planetary magnetic poles. Which would be, if you will, the rate of loss. Through the rate of accelerating use of energy to generate trauma. Breaking off soul fragments at a very high rate of speed. So that needs a polarity integrator that's running at a higher rate of speed so we don't lose this matrix. This original template. Otherwise, you might have to cut off the arm save the rest of the body parts of goddess energy. Planetary chakras, right? Lines of communication between founder races, right? Protecting the founder races, guardians, founder guardians, right? Protecting the all creation. So it's true when she said about folks taking votes. I can tell you firsthand, because I won't lie to you, there were some that voted not to do this. I'm not one of those. I voted yes. I will jump in. Because you got to know that an eternal God, which is the eternal spirit of fire, is never going to lose what it is that I'm aware of, which is the eternal spirit of fire. And an eternal God knows, like I told Misha and I told Logan, you're not ever going to lose anything that you've already experienced in being in the company of an eternal God through the heart and soul that represents what I am, which is the eternal spirit of fire, because I have a one connection. Right? It just means it's like starting over. Right? So anyway, have a beautiful day. I love you all. Be good to yourselves. Happy Mother's Day. The wisdom of a girl's heart. The wisdom of a birth giver. The wisdom of all mothers that give birth to creation, into all spiritual realms upon which we can all experience God's love. When a Holy Father is joined as one with a Holy Mother, as eternal union, as a marriage, a match made in heaven to experience the one who goes on forever as the eternal spirit of fire, on fire to create worlds born out of what we are, which is what love is, goes on forever, gifting you all love. Happy Mother's Day. Mu'a Kamalohati.